Understanding Segregation in America. A historical reflection in modern context. Hello and welcome back to Say So. We are thrilled to have you here. Let's get into today's topic. Segregation has been one of the most enduring and damaging aspects of American history, particularly when it comes to the experience of African Americans. Often misconstrued as a peaceful time when black communities were able to thrive in their own spaces, the true purpose of segregation was far more sinister. While black communities, in many instances, were able to build prosperous businesses, schools, and institutions, segregation was never about fostering peaceful coexistence or providing opportunities for real growth. Instead, it was a deliberate tool of oppression, designed to maintain a racial hierarchy and deny African Americans the full benefits of freedom, citizenship, and human dignity. In this discussion, we will explore the false perceptions of segregation as a time of peace and prosperity for black people and clarify the historical and current realities of segregation's destructive purpose. 1. The illusion of segregated prosperity. When we think about segregation, it's important to acknowledge that many African American communities did thrive in segregated spaces. The period before the Civil Rights Movement, particularly in the early 20th century, saw the rise of prosperous black neighborhoods, businesses, and institutions. From the famous Black Wall Street of Tulsa, Oklahoma, to the vibrant communities in Harlem, New York, these places were symbols of black resilience. African Americans created schools, restaurants, banks, and clean parks. They thrived because they were determined to succeed, despite the overwhelming obstacles imposed by segregation. In places like the Greenwood district of Tulsa, black business owners became shoemakers, restaurant owners, doctors, and lawyers. Black communities had their own schools and were able to nurture their children in an environment that encouraged success. Black people greeted each other with smiles and camaraderie, creating a sense of belonging, safety, and harmony within their own communities. There was a sense of pride in the accomplishments of these neighborhoods, as they provided a glimpse of what could have been if black people were given equal access to resources and opportunities. However, this thriving black middle class was a direct result of black people's resourcefulness and determination to survive in an oppressive system. The reality of segregation was not that it allowed for black prosperity, but that it systematically limited opportunities for black people to access the same wealth, education, and resources that were available to white Americans. 2. The sky darkens. The destruction of black prosperity. The image of a thriving, peaceful black community under segregation is shattered when we understand the violent and oppressive nature of segregation's purpose. Segregation was not a peaceful institution, nor was it intended to create spaces where black people could simply live and thrive in harmony. Instead, segregation was designed to keep black people separate, inferior, and subjugated to white supremacy. Segregation laws were meant to enforce racial boundaries that kept African Americans from accessing many of the same rights, opportunities, and privileges as white Americans. Schools were underfunded and overcrowded, public spaces were off-limits, and economic opportunities were deliberately restricted. While some communities managed to build businesses and institutions, this was always done in the face of overwhelming adversity, as black people were consistently denied access to the larger, white-dominated economy. Perhaps the most shocking manifestation of how segregation truly worked can be seen in the destruction of black communities that had achieved some level of prosperity. The horrific bombing of Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in 1921 is a prime example of how a thriving black community was targeted by white supremacists. The community, which had been home to successful black business owners, doctors, and lawyers, was destroyed in a single day by white mobs who attacked with violence and arson. Dozens of black people were killed, and hundreds of homes and businesses were destroyed. This event, like many others in history, demonstrates that segregation was never about creating safe, peaceful spaces for African Americans to live freely. Instead, it was a tool to maintain control, suppress black economic independence, and ensure that black people remained in a subordinate position to white society. Understanding the true purpose of segregation requires us to look at its role as a tool of oppression. The purpose of segregation was not to allow African Americans to thrive but to restrict them and suppress their potential. Segregation was a direct attempt to limit the social, political, and economic mobility of black people and to prevent them from achieving true equality. Segregation laws were implemented in the late 19th and early 20th centuries as part of a larger effort to maintain white dominance in the wake of Reconstruction. Following the end of the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, white America sought ways to reinstitute control over the black population. Jim Crow laws, which enforced segregation, were one of the primary means by which this control was maintained. Under segregation, African Americans were confined to specific geographic areas, deprived of basic services, and denied equal access to education and employment opportunities. The black experience under segregation was not one of peace and prosperity but of constant struggle and resistance against a system designed to limit their potential. 4. The legacy of segregation in modern America. Although the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s led to the formal dismantling of segregation through laws like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the legacy of segregation continues to affect African American communities to this day. Systemic racism and economic inequality persist, with black Americans often facing significant barriers to achieving the same level of success as their white counterparts. The remnants of segregation can still be seen in racially segregated neighborhoods, disparities in education, and the wealth gap between black and white families. While black communities today have made significant strides in areas like business ownership, education, and political representation, they still face challenges rooted in the structural inequalities created by decades of segregation. Moreover, the history of violence and destruction faced by black communities, such as the bombing of Black Wall Street, has left a lasting scar on the collective psyche of African Americans. The fear of losing hard-won progress remains, and the trauma of racial violence continues to reverberate through black communities. 5. A call to action. Understanding segregation's true purpose. As we reflect on the history and legacy of segregation, it's crucial not to misconstrue the idea that segregation somehow allowed black people to thrive in their own spaces. The thriving businesses, schools, and institutions created by black communities during the era of segregation were born out of necessity and resilience, not out of any beneficent design of segregation. Segregation was not a peaceful space for black people, but a tool designed to maintain control and subjugation. The destruction of successful black communities like Greenwood in Tulsa is proof that segregation was not about providing opportunities for black people to flourish. It was about keeping them isolated, disempowered, and in a subordinate position to white America. To move forward, we must confront the full truth of segregation and its enduring impact on the lives of black Americans. We must work toward a society that truly values equality and justice, one in which black people are not just allowed to thrive but are given the tools, resources, and opportunities to do so on equal footing with their white counterparts. In honoring the history of segregation, we recognize that black people have always been capable of greatness. The fight for true equality, justice, and opportunity continues, and we must ensure that the mistakes of the past never repeat themselves. Conclusion. Segregation in America was never about peace, harmony, or allowing black people to thrive. It was about maintaining racial control and preventing black people from achieving the same opportunities as white Americans. Although black communities demonstrated resilience and resourcefulness in the face of segregation, the true purpose of segregation was oppression, not prosperity. Today, we must continue to honor the history of resistance against segregation and work towards a more just and equitable society for all.